Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Chris Nichols on the podcast. He is the Chief Talent Officer at Council Capital. They are a lower middle market private equity firm based in Nashville. This is going to be a little bit heavy on the talent side because he focuses on strategic talent initiatives within the portfolio companies, doing a lot of performance reviews of talent, making sure that they have the right people in the right seats at the executive level, but also at different levels throughout the organizations. So we dig deep into kind of what he's doing from a private equity standpoint in order to ensure that the businesses that they acquire are set up for success in the long run. So pretty interesting episode. We'll talk a lot about talent. So let's get Chris on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Chris, man, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being on.
Appreciate it, Justin. Happy to be here.
Cool. Well, let's kind of jump right in. Give everybody that's listening a little bit of an overview of kind of who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
Yeah. So, my background's a bit unique, but to kind of jump to where I am today, I am the Chief Talent Officer at Council Capital. We are a lower middle market private equity firm in the healthcare space. We buy healthcare companies, services, tech-enabled services. Basically, if you're a business that touches the healthcare industry, you're in play. But I think when people immediately think of healthcare, they go to healthcare services. And we do have healthcare services companies, but there is such as the largest industry in the United States, there are so many different service-oriented companies that are touching that space.
Got it. And so as the Chief Talent Officer, what does that mean as it relates to Council Capital? What are some of your remits or day-to-day kind of operational focus?
That is a great question. And fascinating enough, I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary here on October 10th. And so I would say that the role of Chief Talent Officer across private equity in general, or roles similar to mine, managing director, talent, et cetera, they're pretty broad and vast in responsibility. So, a lot that I have seen are kind of executive recruiters or retained search recruiters that have moved over to the private equity side, et cetera. My role is a bit more broad, and I hesitate to say strategic because it's not like doing executive search is not strategic, because it absolutely is, and it's a massive piece of what we do. But I would just say it's more broad in the sense of I act as a strategic advisor, consultant to our CEOs, our boards, as well as our HR and talent leadership teams in our portfolio. And so that can look like everything from managing our performance management modeling, so the things that we're doing around 9-box assessments in our portfolio, doing 360s, ensuring that process goes smoothly. We do both of those things. So we do 360s annually with our CEOs. We ask all of our boards, or we ask all of our board meetings, we ask all of our CEOs to do a 9-box of their executive team at least twice a year in our quarterly board reviews. So talking through performance management with their executive team, how can we, what are the areas of improvement that we need to see from them? Workforce planning and strategy are a big portion of the kind of conversations that I'm having on a weekly basis, right? Like, how do we get the right butts in the right seats as quickly as possible? And that can be at scale. It can be executive team hiring. It can be, smaller, younger company that's like, when do we hire this person, right? What are the things that we need to do in order to have, what do we need to have happening here that's creating such a glutton of work for the current employees that we need to go hire the specialist because the generalist can't get the job done the way that we need them to get it done. So it's pretty vast and broad, but going back to what I said at the beginning, it's about being a strategic advisor to our teams and our portfolio companies, particularly the CEOs, but working with our boards, working with our investment partners that we have here at Council, who are all fantastic. And what I think I'm most proud of in this role is that in a size firm that we are, to have this role says a lot about Council's investment partners and their team, because even just having a value creation team, which is now a team of 7 or so, which is about 50% of our workforce at Council, is value creation. So we are heavily invested in supporting our portfolio companies and helping them drive to success. And so the fact that a bunch of finance guys got in a room and said, you know what we need to do? We need to bring somebody in that can help us advise on talent, help us make sure that we have the right people, help us make sure that we're performance managing, because we believe that people are the greatest asset in our companies in order to have a great investment.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work with private equity, and the small shops, they spend a lot of money on exec search, right? And it is a little bit of a blocking and tackling and kind of, we need a butt in the seat and go find it, versus what you're doing, which is a bit more holistic and not just filling open positions. It's really about the health of the businesses that you're supporting and acquiring, right? So maybe talk a little bit more about that, because a lot of the people that I have on the podcast are more on the investment side of the PE, and so we can talk a little bit more talent focused on this podcast. I think we won't lose too many listeners because of it, but so maybe talk about since you've been there a year, what was it like coming in? Did they have something in place before you joined, or were you kind of the first talent-focused person in the firm? And maybe talk about kind of the evolution of what you've seen over the last year.
Yeah, so let me first kind of connect my background to how this happened. Yeah. So funny enough, I got started in college athletics. I was doing sales and fundraising, which is somewhat applicable, right? Like learning how to communicate, learning how to report, do rapport building, etc. When I flexed out of college athletics, I got into third-party recruiting. So first staffing, and then I was hired away to do recruitment process outsourcing, which there's like different levels of understanding about what RPO is, recruitment process outsourcing, but functionally my role was selling RPO services, which is the outsourcing of all or part of a recruitment function, to private equity-backed companies, Fortune 1000 companies, privately owned, founder-led businesses, kind of the gamut. Fortunately, I was doing both healthcare and manufacturing at the time, and so I was able to gain a lot of experience in the healthcare sector from 2017 through COVID, and so really took an understanding to what was happening in the healthcare industry, was really trying to be at the forefront of helping healthcare executives, not just HR executives, but healthcare executives understand the looming potential for catastrophe when it came to healthcare workforce planning. And then it happened, kind of it all happened at once. I think we were planning for there's going to be a shortage of this many people in 10 years, but then it all kind of came about with COVID, and it was, oh my gosh, now we're spending all of this money on travelers, healthcare staffing went absolutely bananas. The company that I was at was acquired by another organization that allowed me to get experience in the recruitment technology space, allowed me to get experience in integrating the acquisitions that company was doing. And that really was able to allow me to translate the experiences of both doing recruitment outsourcing, systems and company integrations, and using that as a catalyst for my connection to Council Capital. And so what I think they saw in me was kind of the non-traditional background of understanding sales, understanding marketing, understanding business operations, and not being from a traditional recruiting background, a traditional HR background. I've never been a recruiter. I've been a sales guy before, so I understand what it's like to pick up the phone and make phone calls and have a list and have a quota, et cetera. But as far as sitting in a desk every day and being a recruiter, that's never been my full-time job.
Right.
That being said, being able to talk about workforce planning, talent planning, strategy, consulting, et cetera, those were all things that I was doing in RPO. And then once I got into my role as a VP of strategy and integration, then we were bringing companies together, bringing different cultures together. And so all of that allowed it to be quite applicable to counsel at the time. And so that's what this seat looks like. When they first hired me, I think generally it was, we have a lot of challenges with healthcare staffing, right? Like we need to be able to hire more nurses here. We need to be able to hire more BCBAs over here. Like, what can we do to help with that? And so I come in, the first thing I did was created a playbook. We call it a talent health check. It's funny that you mentioned the word health earlier, and I was like, boom, okay, we can bring that in. But created a talent health check where I was able to evaluate each of our companies. I did interviews with key stakeholders around talent. So I spent the most time with HR, operations, and TA, but also interviewed executives in the business. Like, how do you interface? What do you feel, right? Because a lot of times, like, there are metric components to talent acquisition, but there's also a feeling of, is it good? Is it not good? And usually that comes down to storytelling, and oftentimes we're just not great at being able to tell the story of what's working and what's not working. And so took the talent health check. I started writing summary reports for each company and the challenges that they were facing, headwinds, tailwinds, what opportunities that they had. And it's a mixed bag, right? And geographical challenges play into that. But so we took those talent health checks, started to put those into play. Here are some ways that we can instantly, like, what are the quick wins in these businesses that we can go grab? So we did that. We kind of formalized setting up the CEO performance reviews, because the idea is that if we're doing performance management the way that we think that it should be done, we should be the leaders in that. Because if we're doing it, we can be kind of the beacon for the CEOs to now institute those types of performance management techniques in their businesses. Because frankly, we are lower middle market. They don't have a ton of resources. What kinds of playbooks can we build for them that we can hand over and say, here you go. 90% of the work is done. We know that you're running a business. We know that that's a lot of work. But now you can do performance management with your own team. So it has evolved from thinking, like, very specifically, how do we scale recruiting efforts, to, well, we can touch all these points. We can now evaluate talent acquisition better. We can now evaluate HR leaders better because none of us had a background here. Like, we weren't experienced in this space, and so now we can take a look. We can pull the curtains back, so to speak, and really be able to see under the hood and have a mechanic that has kind of a clue, like, hey, the air filter is actually just clogged. What if we just put a new air filter in? Right. It's little things like that, and I think historically, and I don't think this is just a council thing, but I think historically in private equity, what happens is we have a problem. Let's go buy a system, put the system in place, and hope that fixes it. And reality, systems are not, they're just never a problem solver, right? Like, you still have to have people, and you have to have process, and good people with good processes create great systems.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm curious, maybe a little tactical here, but are you being tasked with doing some recruiting for, like, executives when they're going out and buying a company? Are you kind of building talent pipelines so that the time to fill post-acquisition of a CEO, assuming you do majority buyouts and the CEO or founder of that business is not going to remain the CEO, is that part of your remit, or is it really working with third party and the recruitment and HR teams at the portcos to kind of find that talent?
I would say yes, and is kind of the answer to that question. So, when you're standing up my role, you kind of jump in head first. And so we have used retained search firms, and we will continue to use retained search firms. I think the challenge is always they're expensive. We have a pretty great network of our own at Council Capital. Like, we've been in the healthcare space for a long time. We've had plenty of successful exits. I would say that we have a good reputation. We also have what is our CEO Council, which is about 35-ish current and former healthcare executives that are investors with us. And so we can always go to them and ask for referrals. They're always sending us people. We have our boards, etc. So, and frankly, we get a ton of inbound as a private equity firm. So, people want to be in businesses where there's an opportunity for growth, and they want to be in a situation like this. The problem oftentimes is that what do we do with all those candidates? How do we talk to them? When do we engage them, etc. And so, one of the things that we are trying to install is more process around like CRM management. How do we deal with that inbound flow? Because in June, it's like great finance guy comes to me and says, I'm looking for something as an opportunity. I'm not looking to make a jump right now. I'm a passive candidate. How do we make sure that when October rolls around, we remember that particular candidate, right? And so, we're doing a lot of work to help us build our pipelines. We have worked with retained search firms. My role with them is to be the facilitator between counsel and the retained search firm. I think that's one of the biggest problems that I have seen likely that exists across private equity firms and a retained search firm, is that if you're an investment partner working on a deal, working to make sure that your calendar is always open and ready to have the first conversation, the second conversation with candidates, like that's a challenge, right? And who all is having the conversations? Who's managing the process? How do we make sure that we're moving through it in a timely fashion? And so if I can act as a facilitator, I can make sure that we're hitting the proper timelines and things that we want to hit. And so that's one thing. The other thing, as I mentioned, because of our pipeline, we have an executive in residence program. So having executives and then having a thesis that we want to go out and utilize to go find an investment opportunity that matches up with an executive's background and experience, right? So that's something that we do. Additionally, here at Council, our value creation team acts as a farm system, so to speak, for our portfolio companies. So we go out and try to find the best and brightest talent that probably wouldn't be that excited about going to work for a $22 million healthcare services company in Iowa, but they are excited about working in private equity. And so we can bring them in. We can spend 2 to 3 years deploying them on 1 to 2 assets that we have in the portfolio, allowing them to sharpen their skills. And then at the end of that 2 to 3 year period, we have a young but experienced executive who has now seen successful exits in our portfolio and has an understanding of what it looks like to get there. And then we're able to put them into our businesses as chief medical officers, chief operating officers, CFOs, et cetera. So that's another avenue that we have. I know there's a lot here, but we are trying to find different ways to utilize our talent pool. Another cool function that I've been using of late to kind of mix third party with my own internal work. We have a firm that we work with that does sourcing for us. So I put together an ICP, an ideal candidate profile. I go to them, hand over my ICP. We have a quick intake call. They come back to me with a first batch of 8 candidates, and they say, how does this look? How would you rate these candidates? And it's yes, yes, no, 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 no. They take that candidate, go find a second batch. Hey, how's this batch look? Yeah, pretty good. Then they go back out and find a third batch. So essentially, they give us about 100 candidates, relatively low cost, high value. We just hired one of our value creation team members this summer. Utilizing this model, we were able to do passive recruitment, which is not something that we've always been able to do. We were able to go track down a consultant at McKinsey who was interested in relocating to Nashville, and she's been fantastic. And we were very intentional about the search and the ICP and the talent that we wanted to bring in, which I think has been just a huge victory for all of us. And then one last piece, right, is multi-tour execs, so to speak. So you came through our portfolio, you were successful as an executive, great. We've got a new asset that we'd love to put you into, right? We know how you know what our expectations are. We know what you're capable of. Cool. We'd love to deploy you again. So It is it's a variety, but it has to be because I hate to use the term the war for talent, like it's so stupid. But there it exists, right? There are shortages of talent. Like we're looking for very specific attributes. And one of the things that I always think about when I read the Steve Jobs book, which was go after the cream of the cream, because a small team of A players can run circles around a giant team of B and C players, right? Yeah. And so we're really trying to hone in on our interview process as well to ensure that we're getting the right people.
It sounds like you're not very busy with all these programs and things that you're running. It's very interesting. And I'm curious just about like the healthcare space. Private equity is obviously, you're well aware because you're in a private equity firm. They are, gobbling up, healthcare services businesses left and right. Maybe talk a little bit about maybe the criteria that you look for from a Council Capital like portco. Like what is your typical like buy box look like for portcos?
The type of companies that we're looking to buy. Is that what
That's right. Yeah.
So we're typically looking for founder-led businesses. Typically, our ICPs range, and you can look at our portfolio and see they're kind of all over the place. But like typically, we're looking for healthcare company that has somewhere probably south of 25 million in top line revenue. But founder-led. Typically, founder is has built a strong business, but maybe they're looking for a nice retirement nest egg, or maybe they are a tactical specialist, such as a physician or a clinician of some sort, and they're looking for the support to be able to grow that business. And they're acting as the CEO. Not all that similar to tech companies with a CTO as a CEO, acting in that function as a founder, right? And so it's like, how do we bring in and professionalize the executive team? Those are just like small examples, and I would say very, quite vague. But we are looking for opportunities to take on an asset that we believe that we can insert our value creation plan, our playbooks, our templates into, help them find the right talent, and then give them the capital that they need to be able to expand quickly, whether that's through new product development, building a sales and customer service teams, because that's one of the things that a lot of founder-led businesses struggle with, is figuring out how to kind of get that growth engine started. So I think really what we're looking for are companies that are looking for growth, maybe a founder looking to get that bite of the apple and a second bite, right? Because that's the opportunity that we provide. And so it is a very, in my mind, it's a very exciting place to be in private equity, because I think most people think of private equity as, takeovers of public companies, dilapidated assets that need to be restructured and huge cuts. Like in a way, there's a bit of a growth equity mindset within our companies. And, there's a lot of variety, but functionally we're trying to buy we're trying to buy assets that have great potential in niche markets within the healthcare sector.
Yeah, it does sound like a traditional lower middle market SaaS private equity. You're looking for technical founder-led companies that, what got me here won't get me to that next level, and you need to bring in some kind of go-to-market expertise as far as that goes. Yeah. Talking about kind of the quote-unquote war on talent, going into the healthcare sector, like what are some of the most challenging roles or that you need to fill, and maybe what are the most important talent decisions you need to make from a retention standpoint post-acquisition to make sure that the business gets off to the best start post-acquisition? So
first question is about the types of roles that we struggle with the most. Is that right, Justin?
Yeah.
So it's really a wide variety, but I think I probably lean towards finance is a big category. Finance and accounting, right, I think is one area where trying to find the right talent to fit, especially in healthcare, or if you have a healthcare services company, like revenue cycle management plays a significant role in business operations. So, and I think generally trying to find finance and accounting executives that both have the technical expertise, but also the soft skills to be able to lead, develop, maneuver, manage business operations. Because like if you're a CFO, you need to understand business operations. You have to understand how the business functions. And so I would say that's an area where you can truly see the shortage of accounting and finance talent that's out there, particularly on the accounting side. And so that's one area. I would say another area that in my mind is a huge weakness as our companies start to grow is finding strategic human capital executives. Frankly, it's really difficult to find someone with a growth mindset but also understands human resources, understands talent acquisition, and how that applies to the business. Like that to me is an area where it is challenging to find the right talent for our businesses at times. So I would say those two areas present tremendous opportunities. If you're looking to get into those spaces, I think that they're underserved. And so I think there's a lot of job security in being out. Like if you're outstanding in either one of those fields with great soft skills and really strong technical skills, I think the world is kind of your oyster. And then second question, can you repeat the second part?
Just more about retention. So when you're going in and maybe doing due diligence and you're evaluating the team, maybe it's the executive team, and you're like, okay, we need to make sure that this person stays because they're a linchpin, whether it's a technical or maybe they're a strong salesperson or whatever the kind of case is, but that kind of key retention talent.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do, pre-acquisition is we try to get an understanding of both the customer's wants, needs, desires, experiences with our partner, as well as our employees' experience. How do they view the company? And so we try to get a robust understanding of what's working, what's not working, and in our 90-day plan, as far as implementation goes, like what are some of the small enhancements that we can make? Maybe it's the benefit package. Maybe there isn't a benefit package because, frankly, we're buying companies that oftentimes, less than 50 employees, and they have not implemented that yet. So, cool. We're here. We can help you do that. Help make them more marketable. I think that workforce planning is absolutely vital, but I would add that having a career ladder and helping people to see the opportunities that exist, in my mind, is the single most valuable thing that you can do in your business. Is what is the career path here? Yep. Where can I go if I start as a clinician? What are the opportunities for growth that I have? And then establishing how you get from point A to point B to point C. If you want to retain your best employees, find opportunities to give them cross-functional work, cross-functional opportunities to expand their skills and test their ability to kind of move up that ladder. I don't think we do that enough in private equity businesses or not. Test your team, really focus in on, I would say it's kind of like a 10% rule. Like, how do we identify the top 10% of our employees and determine who amongst that 10, 15% are people that we know that we want to invest in and grow, and then also give them the opportunities to stretch, touch larger areas of the organization and give them exposure as well to whether they are on the C-suite or executive team or not. Give them more exposure to the leadership group in place.
Do you ever think about or look at talent almost as a portfolio resource, meaning that you may have an A player in company A that maybe the career ladder isn't as defined, and maybe they're hitting the ceiling at a mid-level role because the person above them is just not going anywhere, whatever. And so in order to kind of retain that talent, you may look at an opportunity to pull them out of company A and put them in company C because they need that skill set, or maybe that person could grow into a role in a separate portco. I don't know if you guys have ever done that, or if that's something that's not done, because I think about corporate America, you're always looking at company talent, not your team's talent, right? And so this is a bit more nuanced, where you've got different companies owned by a private equity firm. So I don't know if that's something that is possible, or if you guys look at that.
Yeah, it's a thoughtful idea. I think in theory it probably sounds fairly effective, but if we have great talent in a business, we want to help. We want them to help that company that they're at get to exit, right? Like that has to be a priority. Grow the best business possible. Look, if there was a situation where that was the case, I am sure that we'd look at it. I'm not sure that we have built out the necessary kind of levels of engagement within our portfolio companies to really be able to identify, here's a good HR generalist that would make a great HR manager. We're not quite there yet. I think it probably would also be easier in larger businesses to be able to, to be able to identify if you're taking an A player, a potential A player who is career stunted. It's not, if it's a company with 1,000 employees, that may not be as painful to one that has 100 employees, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I would say that we're probably a little bit on the smaller side to be able to consider thinking about, our companies are a little on the smaller side to be able to consider thinking about taking a great team player from one company and switch. I mean, our CEO probably wouldn't be the biggest fan of that, right?
Well, right. Yeah. You'd have to, there's a lot of blocking and tackling that would need to go on, and stakeholdering that would need to go on if that was the case. I just, it's something that I just kind of popped in my brain as you were talking about kind of all the talent evaluations that you're doing, if that would pop up as like, we don't want to lose this person kind of standpoint.
Yeah, no, for sure. And look, if it came down to somebody coming to us and having that conversation, we would definitely look. But, we don't just create opportunities because we have A players. Like, we'd love to. Like, it doesn't always work that way. I am a big believer that, that's where the stretch opportunities come in, right? Of give that person the opportunity to do more in their current role and set them up for greater success down the road. Hopefully with us.
Yeah, I want to shift a little bit to AI. Everybody and their brother is talking about AI, and I'm curious about maybe what you're seeing from an integration of AI into some of your acquisition target companies. Like, is AI kind of being layered in there as a value add? And then I've got a follow up to that. But yeah, are you kind of seeing
Is
AI
it being layered in by us? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I guess either by you or by the companies that you're acquiring. Are they adding AI, and is that attractive for you as investors?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think when you look at AI, I think that the biggest opportunity is to remove the administrative. I'm not on that wagon of saying AI is going to replace X number of people in the workforce. I think what AI, at least the current iterations that we have of generative AI, allow us to remove administrative burden, thus creating a better employee experience. Because much of the employee experience is centered around doing work that is considered monotonous or uninspired work. Like if I'm a clinician, I'm having to do intake and take down all the notes. Why can't we just use transcription in order to do that? And then me be able to review, provide the output, things of that nature. So I think, it is, I think, especially in healthcare where you have compliance and HIPAA and you have a lot of elements, I think that it's a more challenging area to implement AI, but we have not said no to it. We have tried to consider, where it's being used, how can it be used. We've looked at companies as well, they say they're using AI. What does that mean? I think there's so many questions, and we say artificial intelligence, but what does that mean to you versus what does that mean to me? So getting people to agree on kind of terms, I think is important, but we are definitively open to it. I just don't think it replaces that much human capital, but creates a better experience for the human capital that we do have. Allowing them to work on, like, I want all of our people to be working at the top of their license. And and I say that not just clinically, right? But if I'm HR, I want them to be focused on HR strategy and driving value in the business rather than, having to read an entire performance management evaluation and write up a summary.
Yep.
When I can just throw that into a transcription service, and if I'm good at writing my prompt, gives me back what I need within.
Well, that's the biggest challenge is the prompt. I think whoever can master the prompting is going to win on the AI.
I would say that most people are just bad at it, right? They don't even know. Like, it's like, oh, here's AI. Well, how do you? They don't know how to prompt. And so I think for listeners, I would encourage you to go do some prompt analyzation, right? Like, go Google how to write better prompts.
Ask ChatGPT how to write a better prompt. It'll tell you. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's like, how can I use you better? It'll tell you.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
What about for your standpoint from a talent evaluation or even from a Counsel Capital perspective? Are you as a firm implementing any AI for evaluating companies faster or looking at talent differently, anything like that?
Not clearly. Look, I use ChatGPT on a probably every other day basis. Whether it's helping me to put together thoughts, here's a simple way of using AI. I use when we use Zoom meetings, I use their transcription and summary information on all of my meetings. Yeah. So that way I can go back and look at my notes anytime I want to and get a quick summary. I can edit it if I want to, but it's there. I don't have to spend I'll take notes using OneNote in a meeting, but I don't have to spend if I'm like, I missed that, it's still there. And those are things that might have gotten missed historically when you didn't have something like that. I think it's fascinating that people think that AI is so special when in reality, most of it is kind of centered around large language models. And it's just like, what is it giving you as feedback? But I do use ChatGPT on a daily basis, which I think is a great asset. I have this long thread where, for example, I said, look, I am the Chief Talent Officer at Counsel Capital. Here are my primary responsibilities. What do you need to know about me in order to be the best executive assistant for me, right? Yeah. And that's how I started a chain, and it's miles long at this point, but I go in there on a regular basis and I ask it questions and ask it to help me find answers to problems and help me to summarize my interview notes, for example. Like, hey, give me 5 bullet points here so I can quickly put that out to my executive team based upon what happened here. So yes, but probably not to the degree that the media would make it out to. Right.
Yeah. No, it's a good thought partner. I use it more as an executive thought partner, kind of similar to what you're kind of thinking about as well. You've been in the role for about a year. I guess if we jumped on the podcast and did another recording 12 months from now, where do you think your role will have evolved? And then maybe a little commentary on the overall kind of healthcare private equity market, over the next 12 months?
Well, I certainly think the healthcare private equity market is going in a positive direction. We're kind of, I think COVID wreaked havoc, not just on markets, but the ability to do valuations, right? Like, it was so difficult for a 3-year period to say, well, what is real here, right? Because some companies floundered during COVID because they couldn't do business, even if you were a healthcare company, whereas some businesses soared, and then they came crashing back down to earth. And so I think that we are now far enough away from that experience that we are in a situation where I think it's not easier, but I think, the ability to evaluate companies and have fair prices. Obviously, prices also soared on companies for a bit there too. So I think we're back to kind of normalized period. If you look at the election right now, we're 2 weeks out from that. It's healthcare is not a major component of the current election. And I say healthcare policy. We obviously have the conversation around women's rights and abortion, and that's kind of a healthcare adjacent topic. But this is not 2008, 2010 Obamacare
Right.
We're not, and that's not happening. I feel that there probably should be some conversation around where healthcare is going, and just the fact that it does cost so much in the United States. But so, we don't have a ton of legislative concerns as we move forward through this potential election cycle. And if we were to talk in a year, my goal is to help us implement and establish better hiring practices, better performance management, better retention, and also better offboarding, right? Like, we've got to get better at all of those categories across the board. I don't like firing people, but the idea that we've got to get better at evaluating the talent that we've got, so that way we don't have to, but making sure that we're putting the right people in the right seats and then moving on from people that are not the right fit for us. Because just because you're not the right fit for one of our companies, doesn't mean that you're not the right fit in another company.
Right.
Every company has its own quirks, needs, etc. And so, and there's timing, right? Like, timing matters as well. So, and that's where performance management comes in, workforce planning and succession, all hugely valuable and important. And my hope would be that I'm able to tell you more stories around what we have sharpened and what we have learned from, more established recruiting processes, more established performance management, and better data around the effectiveness of our teams.
Yeah. Well, we could talk for hours about talent, given that's kind of our areas of focus. But I won't put the listeners through that. So we'll kind of wrap around here. We'll end with the 3-pack of questions that I ask kind of all guests. And the first one is, what is your favorite business book that you're into?
So there's a lot. If you could see my desk, I've got a whole stack of books here. At home, I've got 2 different stacks of books, but when I speak at HR conferences, for the longest time, I recommended a book called People Over Profit by Dale. I'm blanking on his last name right now, but People Over Profit, great book that I think impacted me substantially early in my career. A book that I read, I don't know, probably 3, 4, or 5 years ago is called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. I'm a big fan of Patrick. Normally he uses fables to tell stories. I've got 2 of his other books sitting here. Most people are familiar with 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But this book actually doesn't use the kind of the fable mindset. But it is, the subtitle is Why Organizational Health Trumps Everything Else in Business. And it's really about ensuring that you have, how do you make sure that you have happy employees that want to see the business succeed? Like, in short, that's your summary. And how do you build that advantage?
Yeah.
Simply.
No, I like it. I had somebody recently recommend a Patrick Lencioni book as well. I think it was the 5 Dysfunctions. So,
and that was my first one, and it's a good book too. Great book.
Got it. All right. Second question here. What is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Well, I spend a lot of time at youth sporting events, which I do enjoy. It does take up a lot of our weekends. I have 4 children, from 2 to 14. And so a lot of soccer fields, a lot of football fields. My oldest daughter's a cheerleader, basketball games. So I feel like we spend a lot of time doing that. But if I had to pick my favorite thing to do, it would be traveling with my wife Haley, and getting the chance to get away and be able to spend time seeing new places, experiencing new things.
Got it. Well, that may lead into the final question here. What is your favorite vacation spot?
You really can't beat a tropical location. I think as far as like being able to relax and just hang out, it's hard to beat an all-inclusive resort somewhere in the Caribbean where they're feeding you drinks and you can just sit around and read books all day.
Yeah, no, it sounds delightful. So, well, Chris, I really appreciate your time. If people are listening to this and are like, hey, I want to learn more about maybe some of the process that you're putting in place, because maybe they struggle with talent acquisition or kind of internal talent performance management, what's the best way to get you?
Yeah, no, look, connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a personalized message. I used to post a lot more than I do now about talent and strategies, but that's usually the best way to first get in touch with me. You can kind of cut through the garbage of my email inbox where I have all kinds of things happening. So find me on LinkedIn, Chris Nichols, out of Greater Nashville, Tennessee area with Council Capital, and let me know that you listen to us with the Growth Capital podcast, and I'd be happy to chat. I have 3 core values: learn, help, and grow. And all 3 of those categories can be done by having a conversation with a new person. And so I welcome the opportunity to chat with anybody and anyone from any background, experience, industry, etc.
Got it. I like that 3-word kind of mantra. It's kind of great. So Chris, man, thank you very much for being on the podcast. It was awesome to learn about your story.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Justin. Looking forward to maybe doing this again sometime.
We'll do it in 12 months, and we'll see if we'll have to listen to the part where you talk about the 12-month goals. So we'll see if you actually hit them. So thanks, man.
All right, cool. Thank you.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.